And to introduce our first speaker, we're going to have Donna Schenk, our Vice Chair of our Board of Directors. Donna.
Thanks, Chris. I am thrilled today, absolutely thrilled, to get to introduce the first speaker of the day, John Zogby. I had the pleasure of sitting next to him at dinner last night, and he's every bit as interesting in person as he is on television and in articles that you read. Zogby is an internationally renowned pollster and political analyst, and just from my personal standpoint, those people who know me know that I am just a total politics nerd, and I could talk politics forever. But my favorite thing in the world is presidential elections every 4 years. It's kind of like my Olympics. And so I drive people crazy with my interest in politics. But one thing I learned early on in helping with different campaigns and things is that all polling isn't equal. You know, when you see a poll, that you don't just have to look at the numbers. You have to look at who's doing the poll. And you kind of learn along the way which polls are credible and reliable and which polls, don't have as much success in those areas. And I learned a long time ago that Zogby polling was one of the best, credible, most reliable polling firms that you could find. So when you see a Zogby poll, So when you see a Zogby poll, pay attention because it's one of the best. You'll frequently find Zogby against video backdrops such as the Foreign Press Center's, CNN, and almost every U.S. news and cable network, he's there. And even Jon Stewart's Daily Show, which I'd love to hear that story sometime. But and you'll also see articles that he writes in magazines and publications such as the Washington Times, Forbes, and Politics magazine. His polling and his trend analysis has been used for a long time to inform presidential campaigns and even to guide the future of companies such as Walmart, IBM, and GE. He authored the New York Times bestseller, The Way We'll Be, the Zogby Report on the Transformation of the American Dream. And he recently published the first globals, Understanding, Managing, and Unleashing Our Millennial Generation. And actually last night we talked about how much we love millennials because we both have kids that are millennials. So with the Health Foundation's newly refined focus in civic health, coupled with a very interesting, to say the least, election year this year, we couldn't think of anyone better than John Zogby to shed some light on the national political landscape, but also to help share some new insights on the civic health of our state. You're going to love this. You're just going to love this. So join me in welcoming John Zogby.
That's so nice. Thank you. No pressure or nothing. Wow. Thank you so much. So let me begin by telling you some of the changes I've seen in my life. I started this business in 1984. What you're about to hear is a true story. So number one, I started the business, I printed out the cards, I was hanging around with some old high school and college buddies. I mentioned to them that I'm a pollster. I was open for business, and Monday morning an aunt of one of my best friends called me and said, "Pollster?" And I said, "Yes." "Wow, I have company this weekend and I have a sofa and a chair that needs to be done." It was not always glamorous, let me tell you. Secondly, everybody had a landline. And people answered the phone. There were no answering machines. 1984, very few had the top 1% had answering machines. And so, shh, I'm on a long distance call. Somebody from New York is asking me questions. We heard that stuff. We would hear from women of a certain age. "Oh no. You don't want to talk to me about these things. You have to wait till my husband comes home." Now think about that one. That was the demure housewife. She no longer exists in America today. Nor does the woman who says to a total stranger, "Oh, I'm home alone and my husband's not going to be here in a couple of hours. You're welcome to rob me." So things have changed. Wow. So it comes to this year, this election. If I don't have an aneurysm by November 8th, it'll be a good year. What I'd like to do is I'd like to get into the broader issues, because there are broader issues, before we even get into the personalities. And there are personalities. The broader issues. There are three overriding umbrella issues this year. First is the economy. The second is culture and demographics. And the third is foreign policy, America's role in the world. And these are what split us down the middle. So first of all, the economy. And it's not simply growth or non-growth, new jobs, the pace of new jobs, the unemployment rate, how many Americans are working and not working. It's deeper than that. It is a growing sense among the middle class in this country that they have been betrayed. And it's bipartisan. It's not geared towards one party or the other. It is geared toward government. You're going to see that very soon when I lay out for you the Kansas poll that we did for the Health Foundation. But the sense is, we've been talking about the angry white male in this country since Ross Perot in 1991. But there's been no sense of relief for that angry white male. And what's going on? You know, I did this poll in the late 1980s. I did it in my home county in central upstate New York. It was a hunger survey. And what we found was that people that you would least suspect, people earning $75,000 and $100,000 and $125,000 a year, were going hungry, missing meals 24 hours at a time because of a lack of money or food, let alone people who were making much less than that. Substantial percentage. So my wife and I actually went out, plumbed deeper. We talked to these people, and we found that they were people just like you and me, and this is what was going on. This microcosm in our county that we then got to poll all over the country. And here's what they were telling us. Used to be, when we had a recession, Dad lost his job in the 50s or 60s. But 6 months later, inventories were down, Dad went back to the factory, made enough, everything was okay. But the last couple of recessions, people told us, in the late 80s, Dad didn't go back. And Mom lost her job. And now, one of the astounding figures that we discovered was that back then in our county, 14% told us that someone in their household was working at a job that paid less than the previous job. And that was the story. Because there were people who told us, I was making $120,000 a year. We were doing okay. I lost my job. My wife and I have patched together $75,000 or $80,000, but we still have the house. We still have the cars. We still have the neighbors, and they don't know. They can't know. We still got to dress the kids. I got criticized for this survey, but I said, what would you do? This is the late 1980s. Would you sell the house? Sell the cars? Sell the clothes? Downsize? Not back then. That was tantamount, they told us, to giving up everything that we had worked for. So we're going to go through the motions of our middle class status, and nobody's going to know. And the one variable in our budget is food. And so we take turns, missing meals 24 hours at a time. I started tracking that in '91 as we got closer. There was a recession that year, as you know. And I found that 14% figure nationwide. 14% working at a job that pays less than a previous job. And then as I tracked it all through the 90s, boom times, right? Boom times and structural recessions. Structural recessions are when mom and dad gets laid off, but the job is gone. They're not going back. They're on their own. They've got to go somewhere else. When Bill Clinton ran for re-election in 1996, he said, "I've created 10 million jobs." I'm still working on Hillary. I can't do that one just yet. I got Bill down, though. Why? Because he never goes away. So you get to practice. There's somebody else I could do, too. Somebody in the back said, "Oh, that's Hillary." Anyway, so 14% nationwide, and then tracking all through the 90s, by the end of the millennium, 20% of American adults live in households where somebody works for a job that pays less than a previous job. This issue is growing. And so what is happening here? What's happening is an anger among the middle class that they're losing ground, and they're legitimately losing ground. Fast forward, you mentioned my book, The Way Will Be. When I published that book in early 2008, 27% of households, someone working at a job that pays less. Last month, 37% of adults living in a household where somebody gets paid less than a previous job. No wonder there's an anger, a sense of betrayal. And what's happening with it? It's what we call status anxiety. A sense that, middle class is not by income. Middle class is in your head. It's what you feel you are. But for the first time in history en masse, growing numbers of Americans telling us, "I'm afraid of losing my middle class status. And if I don't, I'm afraid my kids will not have middle class status." They're piling up debt. Where's the opportunity afterward? And it's not, when we talk about this resentment and anger, it's not that 99% against the 1%. It's more about what Tom Edsall, now of the New York Times, previously for many years of the Washington Post, referred to as the new haves versus the new have-nots. The new haves, according to this analysis, are public employees who have vacation and benefits and steady pay and automatic escalators. And the new have-nots are their exact counterparts. You can't tell the difference if they stand next to each other in the mirror. But the counterparts of the private sector say, "I don't have this, I don't have this, I don't have this, I don't have this security, and I'm paying for the person next to me." That's the resentment. And so, whether that's a legitimate feeling or not, it is. And it's driving a lot of the anger and betrayal that a lot of folks in the middle class feel. That's the economic side. People are actually losing ground by the millions. So now we move into the second umbrella issue, and it's culture and demographics. And very simply, You are a member of this white middle class with a sense all around you that if you yourself are not losing ground or losing the American dream, you know people who are. And now you're looking at your neighborhood. And the broad demographics don't tell the story. The broad demographics are, in 2042, we will become a minority-majority nation. But many Americans are saying, that's my community already. I'm looking out and I'm seeing Latinos. Latinos who don't appreciate Western civilization, the Anglo-Saxon culture. Asian, refugees, African Americans. My kids dating, hanging out with different people. Where's my America? The same America that's causing me to lose ground is causing me also to lose my America that I grew up with. Transgender? Toilets? I had that issue in my office. We had a transgender receptionist. Changed to woman. Going to the ladies' room. A contingent of some of the older call center ladies. They used to call themselves Zogby's call girls. They were in... They're in their 70s and 80s, and they came in, we're very uncomfortable. And I'm thinking to myself, nobody wants to see your thing anyway. Just close the door. If she's a pervert, we already got laws about perverts. Shut the door. You don't need a law. Where the hell am I? If you're tweeting, somebody's in the back tweeting, I'm watching a grown man deteriorate in front of my... But the bottom line is lots of changes. When folks like Donald Trump say, make America great again, they're saying, make America white again. And if he leaves you any doubt, he says, make America white again. He comes about as close as anybody can come to saying it. But the demographics are clearly there. And we have to understand the demographics. I'm a baby boomer. 81% of our age cohort is white. My sons are older millennials. 61% of their age cohort is white. By the time you get to younger millennials, 57% are white. My little granddaughter is 3, born into an age cohort that is 48% white. That is what it is. And this is America. And what we're seeing in many ways, I hate to put it so bluntly, but I have everywhere else, so I'll put it bluntly here. This is the death rattle of an older America. And it's expressing itself in this election in this way. Now we get to foreign policy. And this one's an easy one to understand. There's two sides. Make America Great Again is the American century, the post-World War II American century, the Cold War, very simple world. Us, them, good, bad. Very easy. Didn't have to learn any of those stands or any of those. Those are just gray areas on the map. You're either with us and you're right, you're with them and you're wrong. And we used to be able to intervene, or at least think we could intervene and make the world a better place through muscle. That was a World War II and a Cold War generation, which started to come apart with Vietnam and then fully came apart. But the truth of the matter is that if you want to understand the rift in this country on foreign policy and America's role in the world, take the age of 50 and demarcate. If you're 50 and older, and the older you get, the more you believe in that older America. reduce them to a parking lot. That's what you do with ISIS. Got those areas controlled by ISIS, wipe them off the face of the earth. That's the mentality that went into Iraq in the first place. We win, sure. For 3 weeks, we win. On the other side, under 50, and then the younger you get, is a sense of asking these kinds of questions. Can we make a difference? If we go in, do we make it better or do we make it worse? If we go in, do we know how to get out? What's the proper use of American power? Do we go it alone or do we do it with allies? Much more, whether you want to call it judicious or not, but at least a much more thoughtful approach based on how young people have grown up. And let me tell you about young people, about millennials. Raised them, and I've studied them, and I've written, and I've spoken about them in hundreds of places all over the world. They are different. First of all, they believe in diversity because they are diverse. They're the most diverse age cohort we have had. Over 40% are non-white. But also think about this, because I watched this transition. I saw it first in the late 80s, early 90s. First of all, there was MTV that switched from 24 hours of the most annoying music videos imaginable to MTV News about kids from all over the world who were just like me. And so they grew up with a sense that there is no other. Those kids are like me. It's cool. They wear the same clothes. They wear the same running shoes. Same fashions. Same music. Today's millennials, so different from us boomers. So different. This is the first age cohort in the US that played more soccer than baseball and football. Global sport. That's an astounding phenomenon right there. And then there was the internet in the 90s. I remember it well. I was polling for Reuters in 1996. We would publish our poll to them. We would send it at 5 o'clock, and then I'd come home and hope to see it on the Reuters wire. So I'd go upstairs, the big desktop, click on AOL, then go home and have downstairs have dinner. Maybe go out to a movie or something, and then come back. Oh, there it is. But it was there. No more buying encyclopedias, trips to the library. And then it was all in the palm of their hand. And then they were in touch with the whole rest of the world. Do you know that if you look at today's millennials and the sense of other, when we ask them, do you have someone in your social network who is from? And we list China or Southeast Asia, South Asia. The lowest percentage we get this, 31% of our millennials say, I have someone in my social network from sub-Saharan Africa. And that's still 31%. It's upwards into the 40s and the 50s. This is America's first global generation. So they're different. They're not going to vote for Donald Trump. He's not even trying. They're not going to vote for him first and foremost because so many of them are non-white. They're not going to vote for him because he doesn't represent anything that represents their world. But millennials also want authenticity. And they're not so sure they're going to vote for Hillary either, because she almost defines inauthentic to young folks. This is going to be a hard sell. You're going to see an election coming up where a Donald Trump and the Republicans are not going to have the capacity to say, love me. Because 100% know him already, and if he tries to change, he loses some of the people who love him because of what he is. And Hillary God knows, we've had many years to love her and we still don't. He could win. Imagine getting to a point where you and your wife are just pronouns, you know, he and her, right? But Bill could win. She still has to earn it. She can't become more lovable, so she's going to scare the bejesus out of Trump, and he's going to scare the bejesus out of her, and that's how they're going to run this campaign. But it all depends on millennials. If they turn out to vote, not only does the Democrat win, the Democrat wins across the board, getting right down here into Kansas, the legislature, everywhere. Millennials don't turn out to vote. It's a different story, completely. So, with that said, we did this little poll here in Kansas. Okay. And there you see it. So, John Zogby Strategies, that happens to be me and my two sons, Benjamin and Jeremy. Zogby Analytics, which is the company I headed for 28 years, is run by my oldest son, Jonathan. So isn't that cool? Yes. 433 registered voters likely to vote. We did it through the 4th, through the 6th. The results you're going to see have a plus or minus of 4.7 statewide, 95% confidence level. And some of these may add up to 99 or 101 because of rounding. This is not atypical. This is our sample. Generally speaking, we based these on, we modeled our sample against the 2012 exit polls, presidential race, to match presidential to presidential. And we had about 46% who had a college degree or plus. So that's actually close enough education-wise, and that's how political parties looked almost to the percent. 44% Republican, 28% Democrat, 29% independent or minor or other parties. Religion, majority Protestant, and then so on down the line. And then this number of evangelicals is a subset of Protestants. So basically 45% of those who identified themselves as non-Catholic Christian, let's call that, said that they were evangelical, and 41% were not. More women than men, and the age groups were evenly 18 to 34, were 33%, 33%, then 34%, 60 or older. Of the sample, almost everyone, because we screened for likely voters, were definitely 80%, and then another 9 very likely, and another 7 somewhat likely to vote. So altogether, 95%, 96%. Among the likely voters who said that they were going to vote, 53% said it's my duty. 24% because they strongly opposed the other candidate. 19% because they strongly supported their candidate. What a way to run a circus. Among those relatively small who said that they're not likely to vote, almost 9 in 10 said, I often do vote, but not this time. I didn't like the candidates. So that's consistent with what we're hearing really all over the country. How satisfied are you with the nominees? Look at this. 65% either very or somewhat dissatisfied with the nominees. Very satisfied, 15%, another 14, so about 3 in 10 were satisfied, and then the rest were not sure. Have you experienced difficulty voting? That's a pretty consistent number we see nationwide and pretty much everywhere. 10% who say for one reason or not difficulty in voting. Some could be structural, and some could be that they didn't understand it. I have to tell you, with the changeover to the touchscreen machines, you do have people who get confused or get worried and actually turn around and go home because they don't want to be embarrassed. There you go. 43% Clinton, 36% Trump, 21% not sure. This is not a prediction. Not a prediction. You can't in June. This is a snapshot of where we are today only. Let's look at this. On the surface, Democrat leads in Kansas. Now, I didn't look it up, but I did teach history for 24 years, and I'm going to make a pretty good guess that LBJ was the last Democrat to win in Kansas. So that's 52 years ago. So Democrat leads, Trump at 36. That's a statement about Trump, to be sure. And the fact that, as you'll see, I'm going to relate some numbers in a second. But that's also a statement about arguably the best known political figure, active political figure in the country today. I'm seeing this nationwide and everywhere else. The real question, why, in what should be a very big Democratic year, why is the best known Democrat polling everywhere 42, 43%? This is not a good sign. The deal has not been closed. And look at this. 21% not sure. Yeah, it's June and it's early, but it's June and not so early. So let me get my high technology yellow page here and relate some things to you. Hillary leads among Democrats, 77% to 11%. That's about right, but 12% of Democrats are undecided. Remember, Bernie won the caucuses here. She's going to need as many of those 12% as she can get. Trump leads among Republicans, 70%. That's not good. A Republican should be getting 90%. 70% to 15%. So she's doing a little better among Republicans than he's doing among Democrats. 16% of Republicans are not sure. Independents, she leads 3-1, but 31% of independents are undecided. This has become a battleground state. Jesse Jackson's coming down. Say it, Kansas. I am important. I am somebody. She leads among women, 51 to 31. 17% of women are undecided. He leads among born again with 55% to her 15. Neither of them are doing what they need to. Barack Obama would get 31, 32% of born agains nationwide. She's underperforming. She leads among millennials, 44 to 29, but 27% of millennials are undecided. There's a long election to go here. Two biggest factors for why you choose. Among Republicans, 26% like Donald Trump as their person, 12% ideology, but 15% he's the lesser of two evils. Among Democrats, 36% like their candidate, 18% the ideology, and 10% the lesser of two evils. Independents are evenly split on all of those factors. What's the hot button issue? 20%, pretty evenly distributed, really. Education is number one, followed by other, which were a myriad of social issues. Then there were family values, economy and jobs, taxes and spending. But look, the hottest button issues are the lowest scorers. Healthcare, guns, environment, immigration, at least as far as being among the top two issues that people cited for them. Not to say that they're not important, it is to say that they weren't checked off as among the top two. Now, Kansas. You've heard and read about bleeding Kansas? Here we go. Overall performance of Kansas government. So we didn't single out governor or legislature, Kansas government. Scale of 1 to 5. 1 was the lowest, and we said leaves you cold. 5 is the highest, which is very hot. 61% gave it a 1. And another 10% gave it a 2. So in other words, 71% gave Kansas government overall a low rating on its performance. Only a very small amount, 4 and 9, 13% gave it a warm rating. Kansas government's rating on spending and saving taxpayers' money, pretty much the same thing. 67% were cold. 65%. Cold or cool, 1 or 2. Not a good rating. Now, you can interpret that one way or the other, but the bottom line is it doesn't reflect well on state government. And look, it's not unique here. When I talked about all of those umbrella issues, this is really everywhere. This is really everywhere. Spending enough to ensure quality education for Kansas children, 60%, 1 or 2. Lowest rating. Providing a safety net for Kansas poor and low income. I'm not surprised by this at all. 46% cold, 10% cool, 56%. This is a misunderstanding that we have. There's a resentment about government. Not only here, there's a sense of betrayal. But most Americans don't hate government. They want it to do good things and to play by the same rules as everybody else. They want public employees to have the same as they do. They don't hate public employees. They don't like people who don't play by the same rules as they're forced to play by. In addition to that, of course, I did extensive polling over the years in your neighboring state, Missouri. Back when there was a big issue about the safety net and about cutting Medicaid spending, and voters told us resoundingly, including older voters and Republican voters and what we call the rest of the state, which is in between Kansas City and St. Louis County, and they said, we want to be fair, that's all. We don't want to throw it all out. Cut Medicaid, how does that help anybody? Maintaining the state's infrastructure, no surprise here too. 55% give it a 1 or a 2. These are the sorts of things that Americans, Kansans, expect from their state government. Economic development and job growth, 55% cold or cool. And there you have it. And so, to briefly sum this up, there are no predictions here. All things being equal, Democrats go into this election with a huge historical trend in their favor in the Electoral College. You take the last 6 elections, the poorest performer was John Kerry, who got 257 out of 270 electoral votes. That was the poorest performance. In addition to that, demographically, young people, many of whom are non-white, young women in particular, young women re-elected Barack Obama in 2012. 73% of young women voted for Barack Obama. They made their decisions and voted in record turnout. They made their decisions over the weekend before the election. We asked them, why did you vote for Obama again? They said, we were disappointed like everybody else. But the other side scared us. Latinos, African Americans, the creative class, the 40 million strong, particularly in battleground states who work in the knowledge sector. These should all be slam dunk. However, we have personalities in this race. And that's a variable that none of us is going to be able to predict. So where do we stand now? You heard it here first. I don't know. Thank you very much. I guess we're going to have a microphone, right, Chase? Oh, all right, good. Hi.
Hi. So, in my opinion, this is very encouraging stuff. But my question is, do you have...
I found the blueberry embedded in the watermelon here, so.
Do you have a sense of how this actually translates into voting for local officials? Because what you hear a lot is, I'm unhappy, I'm ticked off, but I like my guy. I had coffee with him last week. He's a nice guy. So do you have a sense of that?
I do. I think this year is what we've begun to see over the last few years is less of a sense that I like my guy anymore. So that, in other words, bad money is destroying good money. And so you'll hear, I like my guy as a person, and I like the constituent services. I just don't like what happens when he or she goes to Topeka or Albany or Sacramento or, God help us all, Springfield. Living in New York, Illinois has surpassed New York as a little cesspool and the capital, and everybody else is in second place. But there's an old Mexican peasant revolutionary slogan, goes back to Zapata, down with whoever's up. And I think this may be that year.
Yes, thanks for coming. Really entertaining presentation. Going back to your findings about the middle class and the feeling of betrayal and being left out and the anger at the public employee sector, I wasn't sure I've heard that very much about that, but when I see polls too, and they poll people's trust in various institutions, government rates low, the media rates low, but often corporations still rate very high. Given the sense that people in the private sector are resentful of people in the public sector because they're losing ground, why doesn't corporate America get more of the blame for that in polling?
Well, I think they are now. And there were a lot about corporate America that what was translated was the very same point from the back of the room, that I don't like corporate America, but Monsanto is a good institution, Boeing is a good institution. There's a growing sensibility among that middle class that they're not good citizens anymore. So pretty much everybody is in trouble. So, you know, I mean, you don't see parents say, oh, talk to Father so-and-so, you can trust him. We're not going to go down that road, okay? But you know what I'm saying, yeah. Yes, yeah, absolutely. Talk about, I mean, first of all, Trump, this was a vanity campaign that went awry. I mean, I could picture him saying, oh, it's time to be outrageous. They're believing this shit. Oh my God. What am I supposed to do now? You know? And I think really that's why there's no plan or anything. It's all in his head, and it's what's working. But Bernie, look, I shared a podium with Bernie 34 years ago. He was giving the same speech as Mayor of Burlington then. It's authenticity, it's straight, it's less to do with what he's going to do and more to do with the fact that it's straight and you can trust that I'm not going to veer one way or another. And that's, you know, I know Hillary and I like Hillary, but you never get that sense from her. You don't, you know. You watch a debate, and all of a sudden she's for a $15 an hour minimum wage. And can you imagine standing next to her at a podium? How am I supposed to debate that? You were just for it. You're just against it last night. Where will you be tomorrow? So there's a lot here to not trust. Sad to say. I'm trying to be an equal opportunity employer with these candidates.
Hi there. Thank you for your presentation. Very fascinating. Just given that you said that millennials are the deciding factor in this election, what percentage of them do you think will actually go to the polls? And also, is there enough urgency for this group of people to actually get out and vote, given, historically older Americans vote most? Well,
You just saw a phenomenon in the last 24 hours with the president, the vice president in effect, Elizabeth Warren, and in effect Bernie Sanders as well. Those are the three of the four people, I'll exclude Joe Biden, that can energize millennials. And if they're backing Hillary, that's certainly, as my mother would say, better than a kick in the pants. Now, in terms of a sense of urgency, remember millennials did vote in record numbers in 2008 and 2012. But I think that little story that I usually emphasize, but I just sort of sloughed over a few minutes ago about young women is very instructive. So I'm just going to go back to the last couple of weeks of 2012. You know that these were just 18 to 29-year-olds. Millennials are older, 18 to 36, actually. But we saw among 18 to 29-year-olds, we saw Barack Obama get 66% in 2008. 2 weeks before the election, in 2012, he's polling 51%. And then we start to see the dam break around Friday. 54, 55, 56. He ends up with 61% of 18 to 29-year-olds. And he gets he gets that lion's share. Romney got 36% of them. But again, when we polled after the election, why did you vote? Young men were not as effusive in their support for Obama, and they didn't turn out in numbers. But it was young women who told us they were scared during the Republican debates. They saw Rick Santorum, for example, and nobody condemning Rick Santorum for talking about contraception. Now, Benedict was Pope at that time, and one young woman said, the Pope doesn't even talk about contraception anymore. And here's a GOP candidate, and nobody, and it's not a one-issue thing, it was a sense of really rolling backward. And so I would suspect that you're seeing Hillary play, as Donald Trump would say, the woman's card. Well, older women are in her corner. She's always had a problem with millennial women, not only because they're energized by Sanders and the perception, anyway, of authenticity, but also because there is just a sense that she is an establishment figure. That's what she's going to have to do quite a bit of persuasion there. And young women, you hear them say, oh, sure, a woman, but it's not that big a deal. I mean, the president of my company, the president of my university, the mayor of my city are women. I want a woman as president, but I want the right woman, and I'm not so sure she's the right woman. Older women are saying, my lifetime, this is it. This is the last chance, which is far from true. Yes?
Kansas kind of has an issue right now with voter suppression.
Yeah.
Did you see that in any of the polls, especially among the millennial group? I think that they've said that there's a large percentage that are on the list, the non-voting list or unable to vote list that are in the millennial group.
Well, let me tell you this, that no, we did not see it in the polls, but you can be sure that that was a conversation between Barack Obama and Bernie Sanders yesterday, voter suppression. You can also be sure that Black Lives Matter will raise a hue and cry about the vote come this November, and that if there is indeed mass demonstrations, it'll be over this issue. I, for one, do not think that voter suppression ultimately will become a factor in the election. I think that that's a glass barrier that's going to be shattered, and it's going to become an issue in and of itself. Yeah, hi.
How much is the trend from past experience of the same party holding the White House for more than 2 terms, for 3 terms? How much is that trend going to impact this election, do you think?
Well, first of all, history has gone right out the window, in terms of this election. And so, count me among the people who said Donald Trump would be gone by September 15th. Then I started shifting toward, well, plus or minus. And then that didn't save me either. But Barack Obama, he's the guy with the 52% approval rating right now. No one's even close to that. That's pretty high. That's 1 point higher than where Ronald Reagan was at this point. And his disapproval rating is down to about 44 or 45. Bottom line is he's got juice, and he has even more juice among those groups that he has to get out. So will blacks vote? Remember, every African American who votes add 1 percentage point to the Democratic column. Every Latino that votes adds 7.7. Every Asian American add 0.76 to the vote. So he's the guy who can get them out to vote. Yeah, in terms of history, I think that that doesn't play because he's pretty popular now. What happens between now and then? That jobs report was not good. Is that a trend? I don't know.
Yeah, my question was related to that. If I was reading your figures right, you said 87% of people didn't have a problem voting. I was wondering what that would look like if you broke it out racially, because I had a problem voting, and virtually everyone that I talked to who was black or Hispanic had either had a problem voting or knew someone who did.
So here's what I can tell you, because it's a small subsample in this poll. So if you take 10% of the sample, you're looking at who said they had a problem, you're at 43 people, and it's really hard to draw conclusions. What I can tell you, though, asking that question over the last couple of decades nationwide, is that we see that 10% figure, and it jumps to 13 or 14 points when it's 18 to 29-year-olds. It's 15, 16 points when you get to African Americans and Latinos. So, yes, it's a substantial issue nationwide. I just can't draw a conclusion from Kansas, but there isn't anything that would suggest to me that it's any different here.
Based on the book, What's the Matter with Kansas, some of us have adopted a philosophy of state-level local politics that would say economic libertarians combine with social conservatives to get candidates through the Republican primary, and then people believe they're voting Republican and they continue to elect people from that group. I'm intrigued by the fact that the social issues rated so low in the Kansas, and I'm just curious, critique what I just said. Is that still what's the matter with Kansas, or are we changed?
There's nothing the matter with Kansas that isn't the matter with everybody else. I told people when I was on a panel with Bernie, I was a socialist, so I'm a recovering socialist today. The Republicans love me, and there you go. I'm Rush Limbaugh's favorite pollster. I've had to pull the car over and vomit at the New York State Thruway. But that's after I stood up straight and said, oh, Rush Limbaugh. But look, With all respect to Thomas Frank, that was so arrogant and elitist. And it's the premise, this is the fundamental problem with the left in this country. If only people were educated, they'd be smart like us. I hate that. I just hate that sense. People, I'm a subscriber to Samuel Popkin's The Rational Voter. No matter how they articulate or don't articulate, every voter ultimately says, what have you done for me lately and what will you do for me next? And essentially, the burden is on the Democrats to not convert, it's to communicate. And the school that I go to says that communicate means you use your ears, not your mouth only. Listen to what voters are saying. Ain't nothing wrong with voters. Must be something wrong with you if you can't win. And frankly, I've maintained my Democratic registration. But when I see Hillary Clinton at 43% at this point in time, I said, that's pretty pathetic. You can't close the deal against this? Am I offending anybody? Not here, right? Is the car running outside?
If you use the polling data, what conclusions would you draw about the profile that each of those presidential candidates would need a running mate? In other words, what would complement Hillary's deficiencies and Trump's, if they can be
Hillary needs
overcome?
You know that show, The Duck Dynasty? Well, a Donald Duck ticket would just round out this year. I mean, what a perfect ending to a perfect year, right? Somebody tweeting that one? I just made that one up. Hillary's got to get somebody that can bring out millennials. Now, frankly, months ago I would have said, no, too cute having two women, but there's something about a Clinton-Warren ticket that's very appealing. Very smart ticket, and she is the leader of the left, and the left's got some problems, you know, with Hillary. Elizabeth Warren maintains the Sanders base without the edge. Too soon for the twins, Castro. You know, 3 years ago I was in Miami and I was asked the same question. And I said, well, you know, you always have the Castro brothers, and then, duh. I said, no, not those Castro brothers. The ones from they would not, incidentally, be good running mates for Hillary. Too old. But if she goes conventional, then a Strickland from Ohio. I think always Tim Kaine is an excellent running mate. Governor, senator, the right state, speaks fluent Spanish, and has not only the ability to get out the Democratic base, but has shown in all of his elections in Virginia. Virginia is really the battleground state. Whoever wins Virginia early, you know who's won the election the rest of the evening. That's just a little tip. But Tim Kaine provides that very special appeal with Catholics and rural voters. But, you know, those are some good names. Donald Trump has to go with someone who has some juice in governing. You know, so it's got to be either a governor or, you know, an establishment figure. That's risky. Remember that first of all, who wants to do it? Boy, you know, anybody feeling Paul Ryan's pain right now? I mean, I can't, why he took the speakership is beyond me, beyond him too, I think, you know. But I just had a piece in Forbes late last night calling him to task, you know, for, on one hand, calling Trump racist, on the other hand, saying, I still endorse. This is the time to say, I don't endorse until you beg forgiveness and swear you're never going to do that again. That was the moment. But let me tell you this, if I can. I talked about death rattle. I do believe this is the end of the Republican Party as we know it. This is the party's Federalist moment. For those of you who remember any American history, the Federalists went out of business in 1814. They were against the demographic and the political tide of the country. Now, I've had people say, yeah, but the Republicans have legislatures and governors' mansions. Yeah, and the Federalists hung on until the 1820s, 8 years later. But the fact is, for all intents and purposes, by 1815, they were dead as a national political party. And I say this not simply because of Trump. I say this because Republicans are locked into this thing. There's 4 different conservative wings, all of whom hate each other, before you get into personalities. So they're having a hard time uniting anyway. The only hope they have of uniting is hating Hillary. But after that, all the open wounds continue to exist. And so I don't think, for one, that can be healed. And what tells me that is in every single debate, every single congressional campaign where I've seen the ads, a few where I'm even running candidates, that the question that they raise is, who's the real conservative? And what they don't understand is, when you're talking about 18 to 40-year-olds, there is no sense at all about who the real conservative is. Conservative brand is not a united thing, and it's not anything that appeals to younger voters at all. Yes?
Kind of along those lines, especially here in Kansas because of the political climate, but nationally as well, and alluding to maybe the reason that no party is a clear front runner, I keep hearing and reading about the fact that as a United States, we have lost our vision of what the common good is, and working toward that. And part of our divisiveness comes from not having a clear vision. And along with that, the issue that I keep hearing over and over and over again, for whatever reason, is that, and maybe this is the only issue that people can focus on, I don't know, is that they don't, when you're talking about playing fair, they don't like the lifetime benefits that Congress people get. And that one issue is just, it keeps coming up over and over and over in this area of the country anyway.
It comes up in a lot of places, but let me tell you where I'm hopeful, okay? And I don't mean to be Pollyannish about this at all, but the more I study millennials, and it's become an obsession with me, and now starting to take a look at what everybody else is calling Generation Z, those who are in their teens. But I see a completely different way of problem solving and decision making, and a whole new ideological battle that's not hard-edged. Liberal and conservative have been 2 circles in 2 different universes. There used to be a time when they were concentric circles. And you had folks like Nancy Kassebaum, right? And Bob Dole, you know, who could cross into that concentric circle. The battle with millennials is between libertarianism and communitarianism. And I like that. Now, government can be part of the solution for communitarians, but it's not exclusive. But both of them say there's a role for government, We're going to debate what that role is, but we're not going to debate till one of us dies. That communitarian philosophy is something that's very appealing. And right now, 2 to 1 among millennials identify themselves as communitarian. In other words, for the community. I get my identity from my role in the community. And now, where does this come from? It comes from, first of all, like I said, less of a sense of the other. And I'm going to turn one of the biggest negatives about millennials into one of their biggest positives. Do you remember that they all got a trophy? They learned the value of teams. They learn the value that we all have a role in the team. You get millennials together and nobody automatically says, I'm captain, I'm deputy assistant nighttime manager, and you're only assistant to the deputy assistant nighttime. They have no patience for hierarchy, bureaucracy. They are horizontal and team oriented. And I like that. One more? More? I'm here. Yes.
Hi, thank you. I have found this to be an incredibly refreshing presentation, so thank you. I was curious, going back to Hillary being able to close the deal, if how much being a legacy candidate is an issue and how much that is an issue specifically with the millennial generation.
Yeah, you know, the legacy part is obviously an important part. And, you know, it's the degree to which each of the parties lives in its own circle, you know, particularly in the Beltway and within the establishments of both parties. So the Republicans automatically say, oh, we're going to link Barack Obama and Hillary together, and nobody wants a third term for Barack Obama. Well, why is it 52%? And nobody else is even close to that. So you do see Hillary embracing Barack Obama at every turn, because that's a decent brand, at least for now. I mean, she may throw him under the bus later on, but at least for now, it is a good brand. But the other issue is Hillary, and whether or not people will accept her. And for millennials, there is the establishment. There is, you know, they haven't heard it before, but they're going to start hearing about Monica and Juanita. And the biggest issue, I think, and this is where that email issue and not playing by the rules can come into play, much more so than an indictment, is the foundation. You know, foundation does some very good work, but it raises a lot of dirty money. And some of that money is for access to the Secretary of State. Now, how much are you going to give to talk to the President and the Chief of Staff and the former President? These are issues. Fortunately, she's running against Trump. But fortunately for him, he's running against her. And this is not going to be pretty. Yes?
You had mentioned, related to foreign policy, that if you are 50 years old or older, you believe in an older America.
Yes.
And I would say that that rings true in Kansas, related to much more than just foreign policy. It's the traditional Kansas values that I hear over and over and over as I travel across the state and work on food policy issues. And I would say in the Midwest or in Kansas, is that 50-year kind of cutoff, is that strong and fast in Kansas or in the Midwest? Would you say potentially it's 40 years and older? Or would you say that the 50 years and older kind of constituency are the ones with the loudest voices? Because I hear that from so many people, and it seems to be more than just 50 years and older. And I'd like to see what you think about that.
All right, that's a good point. And I did not measure that in the poll. You know, and we could veer from that. That's a general kind of rule, and it is, and to some degree, it's based on the life cycle, on age. But I think that's breaking. You know, this is a creative class town. Kansas City, Topeka. Wherever you see creative class, wherever you see universities, wherever you see young people clustering, wherever you see entrepreneurship and that sense of growth and all that, you start to see a breakdown. See it particularly with millennials who are not local. They may live locally, but they're 7 and 24. And so I can't pinpoint with any specificity except to suggest to you that that is passing, that sentiment, that it is passing. Yes? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. There's a microphone here, and then we'll go to you.
You've said...
Last question? Okay.
Sorry. You've said several things that I think are incredibly surprising and, noteworthy. But what stuck out to me was that currently, right now, Hillary Clinton, being a Democrat, is surpassing Donald Trump, Republican, in Kansas, and that is the first time in however long that that's happened. Would you say that that is the most surprising thing you found, or would you call that historic? Is that something that is really big to you, or is there something else that you think is maybe more significant in your polling?
I would call it historic if you shut your cell phones off and there's no TV camera. Then it is historic. Yeah, if it plays out. Yeah. See, there are states in transition. Arizona, I think, becomes blue. I think Georgia, if not this year, very soon, Georgia becomes blue. I think, believe it or not, South Carolina does too. This is demographics speaking. Texas, hard to see it, but eventually it does. Latino and creative class. But now, for God's sakes, Kansas? Take that, Thomas Frank.